And a lot of people actually found it to be a kind of contemplative event for them. That was what their experience was. A lot of people, they lay down and went into this sort of deep meditative state. A lot of people found the actual reading of it to be kind of trance-like in its own way. And it was really cool to see people who'd never heard of this, knew nothing about Middle English mysticism or the Middle Ages at all, get like so into this. Some people were singing the passages they were doing. One woman said she'd like felt the text in her bones afterwards. And I was just like, wow, this is a completely different way of engaging with this.
Solomon and Smith. I'm going to start with the almond blossoms. So let's imagine that the viewer has almond blossoms in front of them. Beautiful almond blossoms. The almond blossoms that you're looking at are very beautiful, and they exist. It is easy to love them. It is easy to appreciate their beauty because they exist. It's easy to love things which exist. It's easy to love things which are comprehensible. It's easy to love beings. It's much harder, however, to love being itself. Much harder to love things which seem to transcend existence, transcend the verb to exist the way we use it, the way an almond blossom uses it. You're about to listen to a conversation between me, Milo, and Rebecca, or Becky Field, on a 14th century guide to meditative prayer by an anonymous author called The Cloud of Unknowing.
So Becky tells us how we will encounter this cloud, which we shouldn't imagine to be in the sky or even within us, but in some other place we can't quite figure out. And while one must not get there by use of words, the only way to explain it is by use of words, which confuses both of us profoundly.
Instead of trying to imagine God, instead of trying to comprehend God, or come up with the right beliefs about God, or the right beliefs about your salvation, instead of trying to theologically pin down exactly the God you believe in exactly the way you're supposed to believe in him, the Cloud author recommends withdrawing, eliminating yourself, eliminating your thoughts, and allowing the God who dwells in absolute darkness and absolute silence to make himself known to you.
And persist in this long enough, then perhaps, maybe, potentially, a small crack of light will pierce that cloud, the cloud of unknowing, and you will start to float and sort of somersaults and other such things. Hasn't been achieved yet, but we have the instruction manual with us today.
Becky's not coming at this book from a religious point of view, really, which is one of the fascinating things about the way she engages with it. This book is known among people who've maybe had some encounter with monastic life, some encounter with Christian contemplative practice. But Becky's coming at it from the interesting angle of she's just fascinated by some of the paradoxes thrown up by it, such as the paradox of language Milo's been talking about, trying to pile word on word in a way that transcends word, gets beyond word, and tries to get the reader to also go beyond word. And also how tactile, fleshy, poetic the language often is.
And Becky also decides to combine Cloud of Unknowing with music. Now, whether the Cloud of Unknowing author would be into that is questionable. He belonged to an order of monks who tried to be as quiet as possible for as long as possible. So potentially loud clanging noises during the reading of his book would have been disturbing. Nonetheless, Becky has found in weaving the cloud of unknowing into music, that there is something else to be found, something maybe unintellectual, something a bit more direct to wherever it is the big antennae are pointing.
If you like these conversations that me and Milo are having, please subscribe to the channel. Like this video and leave a comment. We do read all comments and we try to respond.
Patreon time, Patreon. Plug the Patreon, Jack.
The Solomon and Smith YouTube channel is the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, and the Patreon is the Talmud. Would you want to not have the Talmud in your life?
I think it's time for a new Talmud, and this is it.
I think it's time for a new Talmud.
Yeah, or collection of well-transmitted hadith for those of a different, if that's how you want to see it. Apocrypha, what do you want? Hello.
Hello, Becky. One moment, I'm just poking things on my screen. Poke.
Do the same. Hang on.
Poke. Where are you joining us from, Becky? You in Cambridge at the moment?
Cambridge. I'm in my office.
Mm-hmm.
I'm freezing to death, so forgive me if I'm shivering.
Yeah, there was talk about whether I should put the radiator off or leave it on. And we went with off because, it's more in the spirit of the thing.
Well,
Point one makes a noise. Point two, cold, it was very cold in the 14th century.
This is true.
Famously, always
Famously
cold.
freezing across the board.
Very chilly place, yeah. Good, bad time to be a heating salesman. Or a great time. Wait, a bad time to be a cooling salesman is what I meant. Some sort of igloo builder, an English igloo builder, you're out of a job.
Yeah, no one wants it. Uninteresting.
What if you're a firewood specialist? I think that's...
It's when we lost all the forests, apparently.
For various
You used to be able to walk from London to Istanbul and never enter like a plane. Never enter a plane. Just constant trees. You could swing. You could swing from London to Istanbul. It wasn't Istanbul at the time. It was Byzantium or something. I don't know. They keep changing it. How do you keep up? How do you keep up with these things?
Don't. I like your tiny cup.
Yeah, well, it's the
He's
only
actually
way.
he's a giant man. It's an ordinary size cup.
Am I a tiny human, or is this?
I think you must be. These cups are the same size.
Jody, one of our guests, Jody, from a few weeks ago, was saying Cambridge gets pretty crowded. Now, as someone who just visits it, like it seems like quite a village or a place. It's cozy, it's quite cute and quaint, but apparently it's Times Square there.
It is. It is. As soon as the sun comes out, all these like high school groups come from all over the world, and so you can't walk on the pavement, you can't move, and then once they're done, the whole rest of the world appears. So yeah. I go into town on the weekends for this reason.
I see. Do you live outside? I hear the rents are kind of horrific, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's horrendous. My landlord is an angel and hasn't put the rent up for the entire time that I've lived there, but that is not representative. So I live in the city, but like towards the edge, like the town end, which rather than the gown, which is I hate that whole distinction, but yeah.
Yeah. I dislike all the sort of Cambridge slang.
Yeah,
I think like it's all like it sort of resembles sort of 1990s skateboarder youth. The way like the St. Catherine's people call it cats.
Oh yeah, everyone
what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, everyone has something, and all the little abbreviations.
Yeah.
Like make me skin crawl, but
what are they like? Where
And
are
I'm
you where are you
based
from, Becky? Are
in...
you from that part of the world-ish?
No, I am from Bristol. I'm a West Country girl.
Hmm.
I miss it every day of my life, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean it's glorious. I'm a big partisan of the West Country. I love the
What
mo
does that mean?
I don't know. Liberal Democrat, that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's what it
Right.
means.
I know I like the Malvern Hills.
Oh yeah, very
I
good.
Yeah, what
Good
hills those
place.
are.
Yeah, dreamy. Very
Definitely.
dreamy.
Wells Cathedral, the list goes on.
All the top sites.
What an accent as well. That is a hell
Oh
of a
yeah.
voice
That
that
is
comes from
true.
around there.
Yeah,
That is true. I
Bristol,
think mine
Cary
was
Grant.
wrong, but Harry Grant.
Cary Grant comes from
Oh
Bristol.
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
it is
mm.
true. It is true. I was
Oh,
told when I first went to uni that I had a really strong Bristolian accent, and
What
I think
happened?
just it diluted, and it kind of makes me sad, to be honest. It comes back a bit when I go home, but it's yeah, I sound like some kind of 1950s RP BBC presenter now.
It's
yeah.
good
So
for the
As
show,
as
but
it should be. Yeah. We got a classy audience. We got
oh, is this how you want me to be presenting? It'll have to be. Where are you? Both
uh,
of you, each of you?
I'll let Milo answer first.
I'm in London, the typical location for a man to be. Not sure where else people come from, but I come from London and have remained there ever since.
Forever. Wow.
Yeah, whereas Jackson, a kind of wacky, made-up place.
Which is what?
And the Rhineland-Pfalz in like the Palatine,
Oh,
the west of the Rhine, the French border. The
okay.
town is called Landau, which I've just learned is some sort of horse-drawn carriage thing. I was reading a book and a guy, and it was like an English book, and he said we took a Landau to a, and whoa,
Oh,
Landau is a thing,
spelt
and
the same.
yeah, Landau. I don't know if it was invented here or anything. I've not looked it up, but and I'm in the village above Landau for the time being,
Mm,
Nussdorf,
mm,
nut village, and
not
it's
village.
it's not it's not season at the moment.
You
There's
see,
like
see what I mean? He makes it up.
A made up place. What are you doing there in
there's
your
mandel blossom. What do you call mandel? Almond
almond?
blossoms by the bucket load. And I recently I'm become a proud bicycle owner. So I spend my day, bicycling under the almond blossoms, whistling
Very
a gay
unusual.
tune. Yeah, I mean that's how I make my way at the moment.
Amazing. Is this a permanent situation or?
Semi. I mean, it's not, the the funds haven't run out yet.
I see. Okay.
Mm,
It's quite a good
yeah.
combination. I'm sort of industrial hellhole. We've got Becky in the sort of, intellectual town, but with a bit of countryside, and then
Yeah.
Nut Village Man over here.
Not village.
True. A crazy hobbit life. Mm.
Yeah.
That's the dream, to be honest.
Yeah.
You left from Berlin, you were saying.
Yeah, yeah, I lived in Berlin for 4 years. That I think is more industrial hellhole than London even. I mean, it's interesting. Berlin has an edge, so to that extent, it's less hellish than London, which is edgeless. You
Yeah.
cannot escape. If you're in London once, then it's a non-Euclidean space. You can't get beyond the border of it. It is a borderless space. By walking out of London from London, you don't leave London, you just expand London.
It's true. Walk
Um,
from London to Cambridge. Cambridge is just a district of London.
yeah,
Basically a suburb at this point.
yeah.
It's true.
Do Cambridge have a sort of an interesting tube system like the Oxford Tube? Do you have a sort of
Oxford Tube is a bus, no?
yeah, it's a bus, but they
Which is
call it the tube, the
misleading. I
Oxford
know.
Tube, and there's apparently enough resources and like shit willpower to keep this thing going. It's like once every
Tube.
20 minutes or something, and it's like a big bus, you know.
I think I have been on it back in the day. No, we
No,
don't. We
no.
have a shitty Great Northern Train. That's as good as it gets.
Is it
Yeah, I like
shitty or is
the
it great? Two adjectives in close
Two things can be
proximity that
true at
you
the same time.
cancel.
What can
Yeah.
I
the
say?
route from Cambridge to Oxford on a train, you have to go to London,
Hmm,
which really proves the thesis. It's just
exactly.
that you're through London to get there, even though these places are actually quite far outside of the nominal borders of London.
Mm. So you bring it with you.
Yeah.
As
Were you always calling it medieval soul, Becky? Were you just always into medieval stuff or from
Yes,
youth, or is
I
this
would. Yes, I used to like going to castles and like running around in ruins, and so yeah, I think it's always been there. And it was only later in life I was like, oh, I can actually do something with this somewhat legitimately. And now here we are, somehow, at least for the time being.
what are these books on your shelf? Are they just decorative? Do they have real pages and stuff?
I promise you they're real. I'll tell you. Look, actual pages.
Oh goodness me! Wow,
For
It's a
that
teaching.
few
must
too
cost a
many.
fortune.
There's a wonderful thing called book grants in this place, and I've been rinsing them dry. Oh,
Yeah.
no, no, it's like the entirety of medieval literature from 650 onwards is sitting behind me, which is
Yeah. Are you mostly doing like Middle English, or are you also like dab putting your small foot into Old English?
I have been known to dabble, but not for a long time actually. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I mostly do middle, but we go as far back as the conquest these days, which is
Whoa,
ah,
Worst
controversial.
day of my life. Worst day of my life. That was.
famously.
Yeah. Mm.
Don't think I've ever recovered personally.
Yeah. What went wrong? Shouldn't have gone to Stamford Bridge.
Well,
I
indeed.
yeah. Just let the Vikings have the northern part. We end
Just
up looking
hold.
like this anyway. No.
I've always said that.
Yeah.
This the new subject of the episode, just what went wrong.
No.
You know, should have kept the position on the hill. Shouldn't have
Yeah,
charged
you
down,
shouldn't have
broken the
charged down
wall.
the hill. The war was going so well. Think of the hill advantage you had.
They had higher
Ah.
ground.
Hmm.
And then the next like hour just weeping as we recall what was lost. Everything.
I do that all the time. It's a normal day at work for me.
Did the Normans reach Bristol?
You know what? I don't know. Surely, surely they.
Surely, surely. Haven't you heard of Cary Grant? Yeah. I should
Definitely did because there's loads of Norman sort of baronial names around there, like street
hmm.
stuff. So
Baronial. Now there's an adjective to hang your hat
maybe
on.
highly usable
It was a baronial evening. Come over to my house for baronial treats
that. Sounds like
and goodies.
granola.
Granolial. Should we go? Should I read the poetic epigraph?
Big
Oh, there's a
time.
poetic epigraph.
There's always a poetic epigraph. It's a USP, keeps the kids happy. There is a God within God trying to remain unborn, a slimy, pungent, fetal ear weaved in the womb of the waving corn. His face the flower froth of nettle, his feet putrefied stars. He slides into exponential birth, into a torrential shower of steaming earth shed from the sky to heal the world's warm scars. The God of God is a dart, swaddled with sweet, inaudible music, swathed with the moans of swollen souls, passing into and through the outer God, but not as steel in a sling, but as warm rain on harp strings, as owl wings wafting water lilies, unborn into undeath, into yellow wave foam and flowers, into blue feathers and blooming heather, and foliage and human feeling and fragrant flames.
Wow.
Cloud of Unknowing, hey?
What was that?
That was that was a little something I cooked up for the episode.
I
I
love it.
I could it keeps going. Maybe I'll just drop it in throughout.
Please do. Please
Yeah.
do. That was fantastic.
So one of the interesting features of doing this podcast is the weird things that happens to the reading list, like me and Milo's reading list. You get really strange things put next to each other. And one of these strange things at the moment is reading loads of medieval Christian mystical texts, but also reading like Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Amazing.
Uh, and it's not actually a statement from Zarathustra. I think it's from Beyond Good and Evil. But one of the most famous Nietzsche quotes is this: he who stares long enough into the abyss will find the abyss staring back at him."
Oh yeah.
In Cloud of Unknowing, we're given a sort of instruction manual on a kind of prayer where you stare deeply into the abyss and find God looking back at you.
If you're lucky.
If you're if you're lucky, and if you find the correct monosyllable.
Well, quite. Did he
What?
look back at you when you tried it?
Uncertain.
Correct answer, I suppose.
Yeah. What? How did you first come across Cloud of Unknowing? Was it an undergraduate thing?
Yeah, it was actually. It was I had a tutor at the time who, this will tell you a lot about me. He took one look at me and said, "You have a mystical aura," and handed me this book. And he was like, "I think you'll like this." And that was a very long time ago, and I'm still here. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And when you read it, was it immediately kind of like, I want to try this out? It's immediately a practical text, or was it more? Did it start as more of a scholarly thing?
Yeah, it was genuinely like a kind of literary critical sort of initial entry point, I would say, because I was doing an English degree.
Hmm.
But, and I will admit this, I can count on one hand the amount of times I've actually tried to do any of the stuff, which probably sounds insane given how long I've been working with this text. But it just didn't really cross my mind to try it. I was more interested in like the mechanics of the text and all the weird stuff that he does with language and just like how he makes you kind of rethink everything you think you know about how the world works and stuff. That was what sort of sucked me into it. And also just how kind of surprising it is. I mean, you said you've been reading some other Middle English mysticism now, but like when I first, so I don't know what you think of this, but when I first came to it, I just didn't expect to see some of those sorts of ideas in a 14th century text. That just wasn't what I thought
Yeah.
a kind of medieval Christian contemplative text looked like. But I don't know what your sense of it is, having read it.
No, my
Now, like,
sense is of like, especially in the Christian tradition, we think of a tradition that has a relatively impoverished and childish way of thinking about consciousness
mm,
and of contemplating the actual there-ness of being itself.
hmm
Other traditions other religious traditions seemed, at least from the kind of Christianity I was engaging with growing up, to have a much more sophisticated, grown-up way of of contemplating being, of
Yeah.
meditating, to use that
Mhm.
word, but of becoming aware of that something is as opposed to what is.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, and like you, I had a similar experience when I first came across this text about a year ago, of
Mm.
going, my gosh, Christianity really did have lots of this stuff
Yeah.
and seem to have lost it.
Yeah.
And I don't know when. I don't know enough about history or about the history of Christianity in Europe to say when, but I guess would be a sort of the anti-monastic turn in the
Mm.
Reformation. The
Yeah.
Reformation in general, people were believing exactly the right thing becomes the central tenet of Christianity, and not necessarily embodying the right thing.
Yeah. And I think it's people tend to think of the Middle Ages as this kind of like religiously risky or sort of dangerous period, but it's
Mm,
actually the Reformation that is that. And like up until that point, you can say quite radical stuff. You can ask big questions about all the stuff in the Bible that doesn't make sense in the Middle Ages, and that's completely fine to do. And I think this kind of tradition fits in with all that because it's doing all this kind of zany, weird stuff that later on becomes a bit sort of like, oh, you better be careful,
mm,
not touch that. That's got potential to kind of take you in the wrong directions. But at this point, it's safe-ish to be kind of pushing in these directions and doing weird stuff. I still don't think there was loads of it necessarily. Like
mm,
it remains this quite sort of, I don't know, like specialized subset that's considered only sort of suitable for certain people. But
mm.
even then, yeah, there's a lot more of it than you might think there would be. And then, yeah, it definitely does sort of get lost or perhaps just sort of go underground along
Mm.
the way. I suppose, a lot of the kind of continental Catholic stuff, they keep like a flavor of this alive.
And the Orthodox very much so, with the Jesus
Yeah, yeah,
prayer, and well,
yeah.
there's so many fancy Greek words whose which I can't remember the pronunciation of, but the Palmos guy, when the Jesus prayer is coming, it's also in the 14th century. So I think this sort of
Mm,
stuff's happening in the Orthodox tradition at the same time as
mm,
Cloud of Unknowing, but in the Orthodox Church, this new form of prayer where people would like stare at their navels and look at themselves breathing and say, either just repeat the name Jesus over and over again or recite the Jesus prayer was starting to become popular. And
right.
there was a bit of back and forth about whether or not this was heretical, but eventually it was deemed okay within the Orthodox practice, and then that's sort of a muscular version of this tradition continued through
Yeah.
through Orthodoxy in Greece and very prominently in Russia. That kind of contemplative prayer remained very common in Russia. But yeah, in Western Christendom, something happens. Well, the Reformation happens. All sorts of things happen. Maybe just printing press. Maybe just that it's not necessarily an interreligious thing, but just something to do with communication. I Yeah, Milo read it for the first time as prep for this podcast. I wonder
Mm.
what whether it was surprising to you in any way, Milo, especially in comparison to like Julian and um, Hinton and these other guys we've been reading.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and I followed Mr. Cloud's instructions. I read it twice,
Oh,
not
very
not
good.
thrice,
Not
but I went for
thrice.
the twice. And yeah, it's in a way it's one of the medley. I also read Walter Hilton, who for a
Mhm.
while was sort of the supposed author. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me because Scales of Perfection or Ladder of Perfection is quite different, I think, in several ways to the Cloud guide. Also read the Book of Privy Counselling. There's this little canon of Cloudman's works. And the curious thing, I think, compared to, Mr. Cloud, and we get Julian of Norwich in particular, is how fleshy Julian of Norwich's whole thing is with her
Mm,
visions and her revelations. It's very body of Christ,
yeah.
blood, bleeding, suffering. This is sort of the midst of it. And then when we get to Mr. Cloud, it's all of this is completely gone. It's about removing the bodily, removing the fleshy. And this is the contradiction of the text in that it plays a lot with language and it's quite rich in its writing, but at the same time, it keeps telling you that's not what it's about. It's as though if he could just sort of mind warp it into your brain, he would, but he can't. So he's compromising. But then there's the weird twist, which is to write it in English and not in Latin, which is maybe it's addressed to a student. So maybe the student couldn't speak Latin, which seems maybe unlikely, but perhaps, but you have this very kind of fleshy, down to earth, vulgar language, the language of people, communication, song, rather than the abstract language of church hierarchy and the kind of international Catholic confederacy. So that's a weird contradiction, but he's constantly saying not to sort of use the terms he's using. Don't look at the book as a kind of scholastic academic text, even though it kind of is. You have to get rid of thought, but first think about it to get there. And so it's a whole text that should be shared. It's like a thing you're creating to be ignored ultimately. Because if you move to the point he's at, you won't need it. You'll just need some monosyllables and a very clear mind and a bit of time. And the cloud of forgetting applies more than anything else to the book, The Cloud of Unknowing, because if you're thinking about the book while you're thinking about the cloud of unknowing, you're going to get really confused. But so it seems to embody a paradox, and I think this is frequently said in scholarship. Why is the guy so suspicious of language,
Mm.
writing such an interesting book in linguistic terms? Why is he weaving his words in such a way, almost joyfully? And then why is the guy that rejects the fleshy universe so keen on using metaphors that relate specifically to the fleshy universe of kind of lights going on or going off, this lump of sin, which is a very rich image, but it does make you think of a lump and it makes you really visualize it. It doesn't make you unvisualize. It's like, don't think of the lump of sin. I'm thinking of the lump of sin. It's this big lump thing. And the clouds, I'm not thinking of the cloud. My cloud of unknowing is a sort of a fluffy cloud, maybe a sort of dark black rain cloud, but that is what it is. It's not an absence of cloud. And cloud of unknowing, cloud of forgetting, I'm seeing myself wreathed in two layers of cloud. Maybe I just, I'm not the guy for this. I'm too easily suggested upon. But how do you sort of fall in the imagining lumps and clouds, or able to take these as completely literary metaphors, and there's no lumps, there's no clouds, they're just ideas.
Does it really cleverly because he actually doesn't really tell you what to picture, if you see what I mean. Because, like, what is a lump when you think about it? Because, like, a lump and
Mm.
sin are quite kind of incongruous things to put together. But, like, what are you picturing? Like, what size is it? What color is it? He doesn't give you any of that. So
I
he's
can
kind
answer these
of,
questions, but
yeah, do I even want to know the answer, to be honest? But I think he does that on purpose. He sort of puts things together that don't work. And I think it's really interesting, like, I guess without making it too dry, from a sort of metaphor theory point of view, right? He kind of breaks metaphor in a way, because he gives you all of these really concrete things to imagine, which you obviously have. You're seeing something fluffy and something, you know, well, he says, like, you might be able to imagine clouds like the sort that you see fleeing in the air, is what he says, like outside if you look out the window. He gives you a list of all these things that he wants you to imagine. I think this is in chapter 4. It's like my favorite bit. He's like, it's like the darkness that's in your house when your candle goes out. Like those, he goes, you can imagine all these things, but then he goes, I mean not thus. And so he tells you, bring all of these things into your mind, but that's not what we're talking about here. You have to take them away. And then you're kind of like, well, what am I left with? Nothing. At which point he's like, ha, exactly. So I think I'm quite happy, like floundering around in the emptiness, but I know a lot of people do not enjoy that. I think my students always find it really, really confusing and really frustrating. And then even more frustrating when I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Um, I kind of like sort of being subject to these silly linguistic games, and I kind of enjoy the moment of being like, oh yeah, you got me there. So yeah, I think that's where I am.
But why do you think he decided to go with this kind of language and write in Middle English when there is an alternative? It's not as though, well, language can do one thing, and that thing is to describe things in concrete terms and use metaphors and bring us into the world. And there's a wonderful moment, I think just one in the entire text, in which he describes a beam of light possibly emitting through the cloud of unknowing, and this is it. This is sort of the main event. But he only mentions it once. Otherwise, it's sort of you can keep trying, you can keep sort of running into the cloud. And again, it's this very physical, almost like attacking the cloud. I forget the word he
Banging or
uses.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's
You have to smite it.
Is that the Middle
yeah,
English? It's smut or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
yeah. So again, it's like, but the option for more abstract language could be there, and it's always this kind of stirring, which again,
Mm.
this feels bodily. And so it is a choice, but it's a choice of contradiction instead of using all these Latinate words, which I assume, especially then, would seem very otherworldly, very spiritual rather than ghostly. So what was he getting at here? Was it just necessity that he was writing to a student who may be more comfortable in English, or indeed to multiple people who would be reading in English? Or was it a decision made that this won't be in abstract Latin, that this won't be in the language of philosophy and theology, but in the language of the people?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it's absolutely a choice to do it this way. And there's a whole lot of discourse around who he might have been and whether or not he was attached to a monastic order or whatever. But I honestly think the main reason for this is what you've already touched on, that it's not about intellect, it's not about learning. So kind of couching it in those terms and in that language just doesn't make sense. It's not necessary. And there are plenty of sort of scholarly debates about how accessible he was trying to make this or not. We don't know anything about his student, but if they were within a monastic community, they probably did use Latin and know Latin very well. Um, so he's making a very considered choice to put it in the vernacular. I think he delights in the kind of bodiliness of the words in Middle English. I don't know, did you read it in translation or have you looked at the
I read the translation.
if you look at
Even
the
more vernacular,
so
maximum vernacular for me.
perfect. But it's so like he literally talks about a blabbering fleshly tongue and you've got to like really wrap your lips around that to say it. And I think he's just like leaning deeply into the paradox of that because it makes you so aware of the language and like conscious of it.
Hmm.
You can't get away from it. There's also questions of like fluency, because this would have been his first language. It would have been his students' first language, even if they kind of grew up with Latin in school or using it in a monastery or whatever. English is still their sort of mother tongue, right? So as soon as you start working with these monosyllables and doing the mantra prayer, that's all to do with kind of disrupting like normal fluid uses of language, you're more attuned to that in a language that you're deeply familiar with, I think. So that's all very clever. But yeah, I think it's a very calculated decision. And it's also part of his overall sort of project that, yes, you need to be a certain kind of person to do this with a certain sort of aptitude to or for contemplation, but you don't have to be super learned. You don't have to be in the schools. There's an amazing line in Privy Counselling where he's like, this should be perfectly sort of appropriate to the lewdest cow, right? So like anyone should be able to do this if they've just sort of got the right approach. So, there's a lot of people who say this is a completely sort of anti-intellectual text. I don't think it's quite that because he clearly knows his stuff. He's read a whole lot. And as you say, you have to kind of bring the intellect to bear in the first place in order to then take it away. So I don't think he's sort of, discounting or dismissing that. But it's certainly a case that you don't need to have gone and done a bunch of degrees and be a master of divinity to get your head around this.
What do you
It's
think
So it's
a
sort
about,
of,
long
about
way of
te
saying.
teaching it as part of undergraduate's degrees then? It's kind of, there's an interesting, you're sort of, by engaging with the text as part of like an academic institution, you're sort of forced to read the text against the grain of the text in all sorts of ways. You're
Yeah.
forced because you're doing it as part of this institution to read the text the way that the author explicitly on multiple occasions tells you not to read the text.
Exactly.
How do you deal with that with your students, in your own work?
I feel so guilty about it all the time. Honestly, that like hilarious prologue. You'll probably remember it with this
Hmm.
huge list of all the different types of people who should not be reading this text.
Yeah,
And
I love
if
those
you're
guys.
anyone on this list, like, don't turn another page. And I'm kind of like, oh God, I'm sorry. I have to. It's on the syllabus. So there's that. And I think there's actually a lot to be said for just like, admitting the deep irony of subjecting a text like this to so much kind of rigorous analysis and I think the text like fights back when you try to do that. It sort of pushes back, and that's part of the joy of it. There's a guy, the critic, I think it's Christopher Bradley. He says that in sort of studying this in a university context, you're violating its terms of use, and I'm like, yeah, fair, you are. And I wonder what we lose from it by doing that. Obviously, there's a lot to gain from like dissecting all these weird sort of linguistic games and whatever, but we probably lose something of the essence of it. I mean, sure, we're never going to recreate like the exact conditions in which this was practiced. Or maybe you have, because you sat with it in a monastery, didn't you? So perhaps we can talk about what that's like. But within a university, we're never going to do that. So it's sort of like it kind of seems like fair game, and we may as well sort of unpack it for all the things that I look for in it. But yeah, deep guilt, I would say, a lot of the time that I'm doing him such a disservice.
Why do you think it is impossible in an academic context to have a more embodied relationship with it?
Hmm. I wouldn't say it's impossible. And
Mm.
some students do, and they go away and they try it and they have a wonderful time with it. And I really enjoy that as a process. But at the end of the day, as soon as it's on an exam paper and you have to write an essay about it in 45 minutes, it just takes away the sort of magic of it, doesn't it? But
Mm.
I do think there's a lot to be said for trying it out if people are willing. People are not always willing, and that's okay. Um, but when they are, I think it does change their perspective on the text. They'll kind of come at it with, I don't know, intrigue as opposed to resistance. Because a
Mm.
lot of the time they'll open it and they'll go, oh my God, what's this? I don't get it. I don't want to do it. Which, that's one way to respond. That's okay. But I think when they really get into it, you get some people who are like, oh, this completely changed my life. I've like taken on this practice. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And it's complete spectrum of ways that people respond to it.
Yeah, it sort of reflects many texts. I mean, this one's a nice, obvious one because the author literally tells you don't do this specifically. But equally, something like Middlemarch probably doesn't sort of gain much from being spread apart and dissected, and then there are sort of exam questions about it, and you got to talk about all the characters in a very impersonal, kind of exacting way, and so it's almost like every book will die in academia. Anything that isn't an essay on sort of an event, but it is a place for dissection or vivisection, I guess, in some cases, which isn't entirely a bad thing. Like sometimes when an author challenges me not to read a book, I feel quite keen to read the book because this is forbidden knowledge, not for your kind of, it's like the Kabbalah. It's a particular group of Jewish men over a certain age. No one else is allowed to read this. I feel like this is a massive flag saying, read me, young women. discover
Exactly.
my discover my secrets. So there's a level where I'm willing to defy the cloud author, but it also seems to sort of play into his trap, maybe. We can interpret it as a conspiracy because he uses closeness to achieve farness. This is his entire game with language, as we've just discussed. He thinks if you get really intimate, if you get into the fleshiness of it, these metaphors we're familiar with, if you can create this feeling of deep familiarity, then rip it away. That's the easiest way to get really far out into the furthest possible limits. Whereas if you try to do it the other way, which is take you as far out as you can within a context you're familiar with, so using big long words and strange sort of philosophical arrangements, doing it that way and then saying, okay, go a bit further into the infinity, this doesn't work because you're too far out of yourself already. You're out on so many limbs. So his
Mm.
way is the kind of, the slingshot, as it were. Get really close to yourself, and then through yourself, zoop, you go out into the cosmos.
Zoop
And
is the
that's
word he uses.
zoop. The zoop is the
That
Middle
your
English term.
monosyllable.
Yeah, that's my milk. That would
Zoop,
be a good one.
zoop,
Zoop, zoop.
zoop, zoop, staring at the navel, looking at your
Yeah.
breath, saying zoop. People enter the room, go, wow, this guy's found the truth.
Yeah, and there's a great detail that, of course, in Latin, Deus, two syllables, doesn't work.
Deuce,
Doesn't work.
deuce.
There's
Yeah,
something
What
really
was?
funny about this. So in the 15th century, there's a guy, Richard Methley, and he tries, well, not tries, he does, he translates the cloud into Latin, and he leaves that in when he's doing that
Mm.
chapter. He's like, use this word of one syllable, and then he goes, Deus, 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 and you're like, come on.
Yeah, and it's an interesting sense that almost the godliness of languages or particular languages. And we get this really textually in Islam, where Islam does state, okay, Arabic is an important language. It's not
Medieval
just a
Arabic. Medieval
the
Arabic.
best kind, of course. It's not just an incidental, okay, they speak this. This is a funnel for divinity. Whereas with the Christian tradition, because there's been so much translation over the years, and because like the original Hebrew was not a thing that medieval English Christians were encountering, and because the New Testament is in sometimes shoddy Greek, the perfection of language is maybe less important than something else. And maybe the cloud man is finding in English there is something more personal and more true than in Latin, which is maybe this more academic language that isn't anyone's first language. It's kind of how many people today consider English who are not American or British or, Australian. They think, how can you fall in love in English? That's the language I use for my papers and to talk to people about economics and diplomacy. You
Yeah.
fall in love in kind of Spanish or an Indonesian language. You don't fall in love in English. And I kind of, maybe that's true with Latin in the 14th century. You don't get to God through the book language.
Mm-mm.
You get, and even if it is the language of the Bible, that's just the thread, the Vulgate thread. It isn't actually the words that God was speaking because they knew it wasn't written in Latin originally. It's always an intermediary. And so, fine, if they're going to have an intermediary, let's use our one, our kind of spiritual one, and we'll zoop our way to the Lord. And you see it even more in the Privy Counselling sequel, as it were, which elaborates on the point by saying, fine, you kind of go for the being, go for the self instead of God. Go for the being. And then he tricks us, he leads us in with this instruction. And then he says, there is nothing but God in there. That is it. In your being, you are finding God. And it's sort of what you said about it being playful, which is again why I'm tempted to disregard his warning sign, or that the warning sign might be a lure for certain people. Because the people who are not included in that list will say, very good, I'm not on that list. I shall read it. And the interesting one for me is it even includes, if you are the messenger carrying this book from one
Yeah.
person to another.
Or if you've
Be,
borrowed it.
yeah, be wary. This is, there's a damnation involved, but it's tempting. I think if the messenger just had a look in and wasn't going to read it, just what's this about? And then sees a massive warning saying, you, the messenger, don't you dare look in here. Sort of like, well, you know what? It's in my language. I can understand this stuff. Maybe I'll have a peek.
You would, wouldn't you? You absolutely would. I think that's
Yeah.
right. It's like it's a language in which you can get to God directly, I suppose. And the author's probably making bigger points about like the potential for the vernacular and all that, but it's also supposed to be like a language of like affect and emotion. And if something makes you jump or you exclaim about something, you're going to do that in your first language, aren't you? You're not going to
Mm.
do that in Latin. And I think that's kind of the feeling that those prayer words are supposed to invoke, that sort of like urgency, that like instinctive from the heart sort of thing. And I don't think you can, as you say, you can't really do that in the official language of the book. That's not what's going to come to you first when you want to make this huge sort of exclamation of love or of naked intent, as he loves to say.
Mm.
Yeah, I like the notion as well of, translating. Maybe you're really fluent in Latin, but maybe it is, even if it is your second language, you're sort of instantly translating the Latin into English into your brain. And I think with people who are truly bilingual, this isn't really how it works. But then I'm not too sure how true bilingualism plus church Latin interacts. I mean, it might not exactly be that, but the sense of removing the barriers and fine, English is closest to the soul, but then it is still not it. The notion is you then get beyond even English. And
Yeah.
monosyllables is a nice way to almost unwordify the word. If you
Mm,
just keep saying sin over and over again, I mean, it doesn't take very long for that just to be a sort of nonsense. What the hell is that? You
exactly.
defamiliarize within like 30 seconds. Sin, 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 sin. It's just a sort of what semantic meaning drips away, and you're just left with this noise, this
Yeah.
kind of arrow. But then the irony of the work is it can't get past language because it has no other way to speak to us.
Mm.
It can't strip itself, or it can't just be that the last 12 pages were blank. That would be very interesting. We've sort of done it. Do away
Gone
with
beyond
this.
language.
Yeah, yeah.
Language.
Yeah, pictures of
You're all
stuff.
right for
A
yeah for the
horse.
last horse. Yeah, you know what I'm saying with the horse.
Monosyllable, but a long one. English can accommodate really long monosyllables. I think the word strengths has 9 letters.
Oh,
Crazy. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, interesting. Like I wonder whether English, because of its tactile, Germanic, consonanted kind of soundscape, whether it interrupts the sort of general flow of, like, I think if you're saying "du" over and over again in French, then that's a lot more like waves on an infinite ocean. But God, 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 that firm G beginning and a firm D end, especially if you do it in that voice, God. And but I was comparing it to like the in the Hinduism, like probably the most famous or most used mantra worldwide. That's a real baby syllable. That one, that's a real deep, ancient baby syllable that you're accessing. That feels pretty pan language as
mm.
well. Like babies, you do a vowel sound and then you close your mouth and it makes the thing. Interesting that it's the mouth closing direction and not the mouth opening direction. Could even No, om's easier.
Um,
Ma.
Making some progress.
Yeah.
and it's
Um,
really like in the back of your throat, isn't it? Whereas like the really consonantal ones are sort of here, they're in your teeth. They're like,
yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah. What's the like
different.
least godly syllable? So something like spew, 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 spume. That word. I've always disliked
Spume.
spume. Spume.
Is it better or worse than Zoop? I'm not sure.
The
Uh,
Zoop is excellent, I thought. I thought we'd sort of agreed.
Zoop.
Exemplary.
Zoop. Zoop has a deep quality to it. The
Yeah,
double vowel, you can really make the monosyllables quite long.
yeah,
Zoop is still a monosyllable. We've not broken
yeah.
it up.
A monosyllable could be infinite. You know, the entire universe could just be one monosyllable being uttered. You know, time. Ba. Should I? I'll do another stanza of the poem. So,
Oh yeah.
um, the inner God is an empty space, or rather, the opposite of a space, an inward growing flower bed in the mind of the outer God, an inward growing feather in the heart of the outer God. The inner God is an empty but writhing bag, tossed from the cargo hold into an ocean of pulsating souls, ice plains groaning in warm veins. Words are always much too meaningful to convey the gap between two gods, the inner and the outer. There is less meaning in the universe than in a word uttered into or through it, out across a spring meadow, up the throat, into the ear. To signify the universe, you must point at it and say this, and mean infinitely more than that.
I love this. Will you say
This.
the whole thing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a work in progress. Um, yeah, it's sort of it's various fragments written uh, across the sort of springtime. I've sort
Hmm.
of ever since the flowers have come out, and since I've become the proud owner of a bicycle. Such
Going
feelings,
through the mountains.
such words, flow from the tongue more easily. Also, I've when I send my writing to people, I'm often surprised that their main reaction is often this was unbearably bleak. This was extremely dark and horrible to read. So I'm trying to write something a bit more like peppy.
With writhing
Sunshine,
You know,
bodies in the sea.
I'm
flowers,
a peppy fellow. Yeah, sunshine and flowers poetry. I've recently been identifying lots of flowers as well. I started doing this like last year with this, but one of the best things about the machine actually is flower identification on the go. Because I was in Switzerland a year ago, and Swiss mountainsides in spring are just absurd rainbows of flowers, and so much variety. You know, it's like you've got like four kinds of just purple ones. And yeah, so I loved like learning the names of them and just sort
Mm.
of really sort of trying to lean back and dwell on the names of flowers, sort of yeah, swim in them as
Are they very Latinate names or not?
no, I never learn the Latin ones. They're always ridiculous. I like the more
Oh.
English, like old name for them. You know, like, why would you learn the Latin name for Snapdragon? You know, or like Speedwells. I like Speedwells.
What's a
You know,
spell?
it's a little blue thing. Yeah, or at least the common field Speedwell,
I
of
see.
which you know Rhineland-Pfalz has ample Speedwells at the moment. Chicories, willow herbs, Rose of Sharon, We have a thing that's just called Rose of Sharon. Ugh. Hollyhock. Um,
Good old English names.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's and it's
Although
and it's
I'm
interesting
wondering
having
just
grown up without the names of any flowers, the whole or names of anything in nature really. I didn't know the names of trees. I didn't know
Okay.
the names of of types of clouds. That
Mm.
there is a fear when you learn the names of things that you'll fall into a kind of scholasticism, that the sheer beingness of the Rose of Sharon will disappear because you're categorizing it immediately as the Rose of Sharon. It will be like doing the cloud of unknowing in a university. The sort of the essence of it will just fritter
Just
away.
shrivel up.
But it is actually interesting, and not in a complete and utter digression, because, because like using the names of things and actually um, like falling into the language, bathing in the language in a kind of hyper sensual way does actually bring you closer sometimes to the being of the thing. It doesn't
Yeah,
just leave you like looking at a hollyhock and knowing it's called a hollyhock doesn't take away its hollyhockness. I think language and being reality are interwoven in a more artful way. I don't think there is just a sheer categorization going on when you name a thing.
hmm.
Mm.
I think it gives you
I
a
think I
perspective, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of stuff in various indigenous traditions. Now, this will be a digression, like the grammar of animacy and stuff. As soon as you know the name of something, you care about it more. And then if it's a natural thing, you want to protect it and all that. But tangents.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting to imagine like a people with no name for God, but who have a sort of a sense of some sort of source of all being, kind of abstract Neoplatonic idea of God is, and they could engage with the cloud or the cloud sort of techniques and go quite a long way with it. But there is there it does strike me in the cloud that despite it being a guide to sort of negative theology, to imagining God through what he isn't, to breaking you out of normal thoughts and letting God come to you and just being pure receptive state, there is nevertheless a need for this positive, specific Christian vision. Like you do, like one of the criteria at the start, I think, of the people who should and shouldn't read the book is, someone who has decided, like, definitely Jesus, definitely this specific, not Krishna, definitely not, not that he knew, but you know what I mean. There is you go through the positive theology, specific man, ancient Palestine was God, and you go through that into the negative. But it does seem to be a necessary step.
And this is true. Walter Hilton mentions Muslims and heretics and Jews quite often. You don't get it so much in the Cloud Guide, but it's not abstract from these mystic fellows to say there are these traditions which are similar in many ways to our own, but definitely will not lead you to goodness. And I
Mm.
think Hilton has these notions of virtues performed by heretics don't really contain any goodness in them because they're not being performed for the right reasons, which is fairly absurd with certain heretics who are, again, they agree on most things. The
Mm.
Lollards weren't way out on all Christianity. They had a few niggles with the Eucharist and language as well. So it's, but you bump into dogma, and I think you bump into dogma in the Cloud Man as well. They're all very sure to say, by the way, fully orthodox. Sounds a little woo, but it's actually just following all the rules. Don't worry about it. And
Yeah.
when we were talking about Julian Norwich and Marjorie Kemp, it was a sense of, are they saying this to protect themselves? Is this a bit of a shield? Because, heresy in England, especially in Julian and Marjorie's part of the world, was rife. It was a problem. They're making sure we're not part of this, by the way, but they're all writing in a vernacular. which
Mm.
is interesting. All of these guys are writing in this Middle English. And my sense of the cloud guy is he isn't quite as concerned, but nonetheless, he does say it. He does make sure this is the Holy Church. This isn't my thing. This isn't an abstract thing. And when reading Cloud of Unknowing and understanding it as a, okay, this can fit into Catholicism, fine. But then thinking about Catholic worship, especially in the 14th century, but how sort of grandiloquent it could be. These enormous cathedrals, all of the smells and the senses and the music and the and everything that comes with it and the images. It does seem to come from a different universe than the one Mr. Cloud inhabits and a different means of achieving God. And I was thinking an interesting thing just in general about religious experiences is they are either very minimal in terms of sensory experience or very maximal. Like if you think of what is music that connotes God, you might think of like the B minor mass, something that's kind of, brain frying, or else otherwise something very, very minimal and extremely beautiful and slight, sort of like a quiet drone that envelops you, but it's very quiet, or indeed complete silence is the
Hmm.
holiest sound, no sound at all. But it tends to be one or the other, and it seems like Mr. Cloud and sort of a medieval Catholic Church were completely different streams of this, and yet in this pre-Reformation, they could sort of at least notionally say, yeah, we this is the same religion. We're going for the same God. It's still Jesus. And we're getting there kind of in the same way. But is this actually just a sort of powder keg waiting to blow? Are these many religions stuffed in one big bag? And Lollardy was one example of when the bag started to split. Or is there a vision where Catholicism could always be the big tent? I mean, you already had one schism, so we can't say biggest tent of all. But what was there a possibility of a big tent Catholicism in which all these sort of various party-colored religions could exist?
I think from the cloud author's point of view, yes, like he sees himself just doing a sort of small subset of something that suits a particular kind of person, but you're probably not going to see him, in the front row of mass on a Sunday in a sort of, lay like church environment, right? So I think he completely sees that those things can coexist for different people. Um, I suppose it's a lot of it is the difference between, what's suitable for the contemplative life versus the active life and what you can therefore sort of get away with as a certain kind of person. So if you're in the active life or if you're a lay person, you go and you bear witness to all this spectacle, whether it's the music or the incense or the images of the passion and all that kind of stuff, all that highly sensory, highly emotional stuff is considered great and really suitable for those sorts of people. But you probably remember in The Cloud, he says, for people doing this kind of work, you have to give up all of your passion meditation stuff because that's not for you anymore. So you kind of get to a certain point and then you leave that. But that's only for people who are really advanced and who have gone through all of those stages and then you can get there. Um, he is still very careful though with certain things, with the orthodoxy stuff. He is careful. There's a section where he talks about how you can't be in this contemplative state all the time because that's something really, really dangerous to say. I don't know if you've come across Margaret Perret at all, The Mirror of
No.
Sacred Souls.
I've read about her.
She was amazing.
Major heresy vibes.
Well, major, but what does major even mean at this point? So she was in France. She was killed she was burnt at the stake in 1310 for her book, and the sort of major heresy that she commits is saying that the soul can always be in union with God, like the annihilation of the soul will happen and you and God kind of become the same and you stay in that at all times. That's the big heresy. The cloud author's very careful not to say that. And he says you can kind of be in this state of union, but then you have to come out of it and you have to do your everyday things like, your jobs in the monastery or your other sort of good Christian works. You can't always just like tap out of reality and be in this meditative state. That was the danger to say that well, what Perret says, she says, farewell to the virtues. She doesn't care about any of these sort of everyday things that you need to be doing anymore. That's the point at which it's dangerous at this moment in time. So he's very careful to just put in those little caveats here and there so no one's coming for him for that. I mean, obviously, compared to sort of Marjorie and Julian, he's probably not a woman. I mean, he might be, but not, it's less likely, and he's anonymous. So, in terms of getting in trouble in those ways, he's kind of covered some bases. So, I don't know if that allows for anything slightly more radical that he wouldn't do otherwise. Hard to say.
Mm.
The
So,
anonymous point is curious for me, and I wonder, is
Mm.
it better that we don't know who the cloud author is? And should we really abandon all quests of knowledge in that direction? Would discover it's sort of, I think it's this week. I mean, this will seem absurd in the chronological bizarrety of when podcasts are released, but I think this week in the past, but this week for us, is when Banksy was unmasked. I've been seeing images of an unexceptional man. I'm scrolling past quickly because I don't want to register this face because I have some attachment to this mystery and had no will ever to break it. Because I remember, as all noble people do, the film Spider-Man 2. And when Spider-Man is unmasked on the train, everyone's like, oh, it's just some kid. Great. Yeah, mystery ruined. And I sort of wonder if, Unmasking the Cloud author could completely denigrate him and that he's quite good as this Cloud himself. And this is part of his brand because it's funny to be anonymous, but also have such a detectable style and
Mm.
not attempt to hide it and reference your other works.
Yeah.
So there's an author just without a name, without a category, but we call him Cloudman. I'm sure they did in the day as well. And I wonder if, this is a big change from medieval times to ours, is the sense of credit and authorship.
Mm.
A little before Cloud's time, there were loads of anonymous texts
Yeah.
and anonymous music, anonymous art. Most artworks weren't signed. It just wasn't a thing you did. Now everyone is very
all of
desperate.
nature, who put that there?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now there's desperation for credit. Everything is by someone. It's important who it's by, and it's important what that person is like, what
Mm.
they do, what they think. It's part of the work. You don't separate them. Re- All of Elvis is one unity. The music, the man, the image. You can't, if you break one from the others, it's just a nonsense.
Yeah.
Whereas Mr. Cloud is attempting in a way that was quite natural for say, the author of an anonymous mass, but he in a more typically authored genre. All the people around him are signing themselves Richard Roll, Walter Hilton, even
Yeah.
Julian, who is a little reluctant, one might see in the sort of longer text, to identify herself as a woman, nonetheless has been identified. But so what is the sort of the meaning of this unknowing meeting unknowing?
Mm.
Again, he's sort of bringing us close, but keeping us far. He's someone, but he's no one, but he's anyone.
Yeah.
Where are we with this anonymous author who's writing such distinctive texts?
I think, to be honest, it's kind of a theological point on his part. I mean, first of all, it's humility, or it's supposed to be a performance of humility. Like, who am I to teach you this and whatever, and defer to grace, and he will teach you himself, that sort of thing. But I think it's also about he's really big on like the limits of the human teacher, and that as a human in human language, I can only teach you so much, and then I have to get out of the way, and you even have to put me under the cloud of forgetting. I'm pretty sure he literally says that, like,
Mm.
even I, as your teacher, have to go under the cloud, and then it's just you and God. So he's like removing himself as any kind of intermediary, and I suppose if there's no identity attached to him, it's easier to sever that attachment and kind of take the stabilizers off and be there on your own. I mean, obviously, there's the question of who his students were. Did they know him in real life or not? Did they have an identity and a name attached to this guy? Maybe they did. But for us as wider readers, I think there's something quite kind of clever there in going, well, you never knew me in the first place, so it's easier to unknow me, isn't it? So I think it's to do with the almost like the handover from human teacher to divine teacher or inner teacher. He loves that kind of Augustinian idea of the inner teacher of Christ taking over. So I think it's kind of as simple as that, but who knows? Because even if not within his time, slightly afterwards, there are efforts to identify this guy. So, kind of 15th century scribes are writing in the margin, or we think this is Walter Hilton. So, they do sort of want to pin him down. Um, and I think that's probably part of a like monastic, especially Carthusian project to sort of claim this guy because they like what he's doing. But in terms of just how the text works and how the pedagogy works, yeah, I think that anonymity is kind of really like deliberately cultivated to achieve something. I don't know, that's my take on it, but there's a whole lot of debates about why this might have happened or not happened.
One of the things that's so striking about the language is the alliteration.
Mm,
There's so much alliteration in here, which is something that, if you've done an English degree and you've read Gawain and the Green Knight or Piers Plowman, you remember that alliteration is sort of the bedrock, the meat and potatoes, the like iambic pentameter equivalent of the Middle Ages that you when you're in a poetic voice, you slip into the alliterative voice. Do we know is the Cloud guy engaging with like contemporary English poetry? Not contemporary to us.
thanks for that. Yeah, I'm sure he is. I mean, again, we don't know anything about, what kind of schooling he had, but it seems likely to me that he would have gone through at least some kind of, I don't know, like a cathedral school or something like that, or maybe even university. And as part of that, you would study a whole lot of literary stuff to get a handle on your rhetoric, and you would
Hmm.
practice imitating all these other sort of greats and all these other authorities. And I'm sure there's a bit of that in there. I'm sure there is. He just strikes me as somebody who has read very, very widely across a lot of different traditions. And there is a sort of poetic quality to some of his
Hmm.
prose. And, I guess a lot of devotional stuff in this period is written in verse as well. So he would certainly have been exposed to it. I'm sure it's just a process of kind of like osmosis. It's just how you learn to write is by imitating this very sort of flowery language of your predecessors and your contemporaries. And I guess if that's the standard and that's what you want to kind of put out, then yeah. But there's also something quite like he's interested in playing with, rhythms and meter and a sort of musical quality. And I think he really labors it sometimes. Like when you read it, sometimes it's quite hard to get the sentences out and get the words off your tongue. They stick and you're kind of like, oh,
Would you mind reading a really difficult part to read? Like a
hmm,
like a sticky tongue,
I think any of it
twisty.
is. Hmm, I don't know. I'm just going to open it on a completely random page and see
Seems in the spirit of things.
out. Yeah.
Page one, equally random. You could land on the first page.
Okay, so I have literally opened it on the first chapter. So first thou wot well that when thou were living in the common degree of Christian men's living in the company of thy worldly friends, it seemeth to me that the everlasting love of his Godhead, through which he made thee and wrought thee when thou were naught, and sithen bought thee with the price of his precious blood when thou were lost in Adam, might not suffer thee be so far from him in form of degree and living. And then he goes on about
Where was the verb in that?
Well, quite. Therefore, he kindled thy desire full graciously and fastened by it a liam of longing and led thee by it into a more special state and form of living. And he just goes on and on and on. There's loads.
What's a liam?
It's a leash. Like
Ah.
he connects like a leash of longing to you, and then you have no choice but to come and do this stuff. Yeah, I feel like that's probably not the best example, but there are some bits that are so like tangled and like
Mm.
yeah. But I think he's always playing with it. Again, it's just kind of I think he just likes to mess with you as a reader and see kind of how far can he push this before you get fed up, depending
I
on
like I like the kind of tension you get with people like this. And I think a fair metaphor is with the horror movie director in which all the bad things that he's depicting, which are, social ills, and we should obliviate them and get rid of them. These things are actually all the things he likes most to depict. The blood, the death, the gore. That's
yeah.
what it's about. And there is the moral tale on top of it to justify it. And the sense I get sometimes with a Cloud Man is that he loves language, loves playing with it, loves this
Definitely.
artistry, and probably loves the world and all the ways to describe it, and yet sort of knows in a deeper sense that we must move beyond it for these certain theological or meditative practices, but isn't sort of doing it unwillingly. And sometimes you see it claim that many parts of the New Testament are written in quite poor Greek, and that the poverty of the language is actually there is a truth value that is more important than beautiful poetry, and it's written roughly because it's the rough truth. This is sort of, the edges are showing. You don't get it so much in this stuff. I mean, Walter Hilton also just astounding, like prose poetry
Yeah.
all the way through. And so there's a sense, and it's another contradiction, one of many in this guy's life, that he's having it both ways. It's not just the very best way to communicate this is through beautiful alliterative language. That wasn't his kind of arithmetic going into it. I am forced, despite myself, into extreme beauty because it's the only way that we can achieve this. Instead, it's a sort of like there's a spirit and there's a body and there's a no, this is beautiful, and I am sort of engaged with it.
Mm.
However, if I use the beauty to deny itself, then I'm okay. Because in the
Mm.
same way the horror movie guy said, while I do love seeing double murders committed, if I use the depiction of the double murder to argue against double murder in an extreme way, then it's sort I've evened out my copybook. And given he's an anonymous author, we could just fancifully give him the name of every great English poet and say, well, it was him because he's allowed us to say it. The Cloud of Unknowing by Geoffrey Chaucer. It would be like, whoa. But we could debut this theory here.
You heard it here first.
Solomon and Smith exclusive.
Unmasked. Banksy. Who cares? Cloud guy.
Definitely Chaucer.
That's a quote. That's in
Yeah.
the video description.
Banksy, definitely Chaucer. I think that's the that's the thumbnail. Um, I've been to a wedding with Banksy, but I didn't know which guest he was. I just know he was among the guests.
Is he on the seating plan?
Well, I don't know.
Suppose he does
The
have a
name
last name.
Banksy was it was the guy with the bag on his head.
It actually wasn't.
It wasn't.
That was Pynchon. It was the
Yeah,
guy next
it
to
was.
him.
Yeah, it was just the whole wedding was Thomas Pynchon, Banksy,
Cloud guy.
J.D. Salinger, I guess, kind of. Who else is reclusive? Cloud guy. Yeah. I think Cloud guy. I imagine him as a sort of cloud. I don't know if you've seen the TV show Futurama.
I probably yes, back in the
Yes. Okay.
I
Well,
don't know where
I'm
you're
going to
going to
make
go
a
with that.
very specific reference.
It's
So
probably going to go over my
maybe.
head, but go on.
But yeah, there's an episode where like an amorphous glowing blob kidnaps all our main characters and tricks them into sort of a permanent Star Trek convention. I imagine the Cloud author as this glowing
Exactly
amorphous
like
blob.
that.
Yeah.
The Cloud of Unknowing, written by the Cloud of Unknowing.
Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting on like when you because I was like listening to it on sort of LibriVox,
Hmm.
one of the I think the Evil in Underhill translation, which is
Oh
kind of
yeah.
interesting because she tries to have it both ways. It has a kind of old English weird music, but also yeah, this interesting 1920s educated socialite
Yeah.
language and. Um, but it said "The Cloud of Unknowing" by the Cloud of Unknowing, and
Oh.
when you listen to a LibriVox recording, you it repeats that every chapter heading. You're listening to "The Cloud of Unknowing" by the Cloud of Unknowing.
Oh
All
God.
LibriVox recordings are in the public domain.
What did that do to your listening experience?
Improved it. I think this is the
I'm
way
sure.
the Cloud author would have wanted it to be. Yeah. What's the reception history of the cloud? You said like people already in the 1500s like talking about it quite a bit, but it feels to me like a very like 20th century like we finally became ready for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there are little bits of reception history, and I mean, probably like three main people. No, maybe four. It was not widely circulated as far as we know. I mean, there are 17 manuscripts of it, which is it's not loads, but it's also not loads, if you see what I
Mm-hmm.
mean. I mean, like Book of Marjorie
Yeah.
Cat, we've got one. Julian of Norwich, we've got eight. Richard Roller, we've got 650. So
Mm.
do with that what you will. It's kind of somewhere in there. But for something really specialized, I think 17's quite a lot. Um, so it gets picked up by the Carthusians primarily in the 15th century. So
Who are they?
they're a monastic order. They're quite interesting. They're a silent order, but they live in community as solitaries. So each guy gets his
Ah.
own little cell, his own little apartment, and they operate in silence all the time except for on Sunday mornings, and they're allowed to have a little chat.
Hmm.
Um, there's a whole, history of whether or not the Cloud author was one of those himself or
Mm-hmm.
not. But they're really interested in his text and they do most of the copying and most of the
Yeah.
circulating of his text. So the guy I mentioned earlier, Richard Methley, the one who put it into Latin, he was a Carthusian. He also borrows bits of it in his own writing, but makes it into something really weird and different because he's very Rollian. So have you both read a bit of Richard Roller? It's very like ecstatic, very embodied.
Bits.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
he kind
Fragments.
of
And
takes the cloud
and
and tries to make it that, which you can imagine how that may or may not work very well. So that's Methley. He puts it into Latin to kind of keep it away from certain eyes to make it more sort of appropriate for the monastery, possibly to allow it to be circulated on the continent. We don't really know. So there's him. There's a guy called James Greenhalgh, who also a Carthusian 15th century,
Hmm.
annotates the cloud and writes all sorts of things in the margins. He's quite interesting. Another interesting one, and this is genuinely his name, Stephen Batman. Yeah, it's amazing. That's the real Becky.
That's why we started this podcast.
Go and read about Stephen Batman. He's fun. He was like a Protestant reformer, and one of
Stephen
his, I
Batman.
know, one of his jobs was to go around all the monasteries after the dissolution and take anything that was interesting and bring it here to Cambridge, actually, into the Parker Library, which is a big manuscript collection. He brought something like 6,500 volumes that he sort of raided from all these monastery libraries. But for some reason, and I'm writing a bit about this at the moment, and I hope that I'll find out a bit more, he keeps the cloud ones for himself and he doesn't hand them over to Parker. So there's
Ooh.
this Protestant guy kind of secretly keeping these Catholic texts, writes all over them. He copies privy counselling. He copied out his own version into his little commonplace book. Really weird. So there's him. Um, More on that when I finally finish writing that writing that piece.
Yeah, we can wait here in the Zoom call.
Anyway,
Yeah, so we have time.
that's all I have for now. Just it's weird. Don't know why he did it. Um, and then the other sort of early modern example, who I'm also fascinated by and have been writing a bit about, is a guy called Augustine Baker. You might have come across him because he did one of the translations of the
Mm,
Cloud. So he's sort of he makes a translation and a commentary of it in 1629, so quite a long time after it's written.
mm,
He's a Welsh Benedictine, and he gets exiled to Cambrai in northern France, and he's teaching the Cloud to a group of exiled Catholic nuns who have been kicked out of England, and they're all sitting there reading the Cloud in this little reading group in northern France, which is amazing. And
Is that the
they're,
Proust village, Combray?
I don't know actually, it could be.
It rings a
I
bell.
don't
Yeah, I
know.
think that
Yeah.
might
Is
be.
it? Is it?
It's
Okay,
been
that's
a
one.
while. I'll Google that.
I don't know. But yeah, they're all reading it there. It just so happens they're the great great granddaughters of Thomas More, which is interesting in its own right.
Ah,
Mm.
it's
And
Combray, yeah. It's where
is it
Proust grew up, yeah.
really?
Mm.
How funny. I've never been and I really want to now.
Mm.
Um, but it attracts a bunch of controversy then as well. So there's a guy who comes into the monastery as the new confessor, and he's like, I don't like that there's this little clique of you reading this slightly dodgy book.
Mm.
And then it blows up into this huge conflict, and Baker gets fired from the monastery, and so it's a whole thing. But that's a really interesting piece of reception history. It kind of continues in these strange sort of slightly secretive contexts.
What did they find dodgy about it, the Protestants? Is it just the whole process of negative theology that you should what is it specifically that troubles people about it?
The complete sort of I don't, I think it's the fact that you get so much liberty and choice in the cloud. I think that's what
Mm.
people think is a little bit worrying about it. At least that's part of the criticism that comes in this sort of 17th century fiasco that blows up is that in letting you choose whether you want to do this in the first place, how you want to do it, which techniques you want to use, whether or not it suits you, that complete sort of freedom of spiritual path and direction seems to cause a lot of concern. And I suppose saying that this is something you can go away and do on your own, and you don't
Mm.
necessarily need sort of church authority or somebody
But you'd
supervising.
think that would be very Protestant, you know? That's a very Protestant thing. You go look away, do it on your own, make your own
Yeah,
mind up.
but I suppose it's that you don't need to be, you know, supervised in any way or like following a
Mm.
particular path. I don't know. This is just what it seems to throw up for people later on, and they get quite concerned about the kind of direct what might go wrong from the sort of direct relationship that you can form.
And I suppose it's just very monastic in vibe, and perhaps the Protestants
Is
would
it
take issue
though?
there. At
I don't,
least, it's written by some kind of monastic guy, and he's got a very clear sense of the active and the contemplative.
Is it
Hmm,
though?
But it's
is
a
it
good
though?
question. It is a good question. Maybe they got it
It's
wrong.
written by a Wall Street banker, very busy life, out in the world day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the author seems to have lived in some kind of community, given how like specific the criticisms of other spiritual practices are. Or at least there's a lot of observation of other people. Some of the stuff I enjoy reading the most in it, actually. Some of the great comedy moments are these observations of other folks he has
Yeah,
seen.
with worms in their ears and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah, worst
Yeah.
place to put
And,
them.
quite.
and a great image of the devil with one nostril, which is apparently every image of the devil has one nostril, which I don't think is true, but it's a good notion. And that up the nostril you can see his sort of brain wreathed in flame, and that by kind of just seeing it, that's enough to damn you. I'm not sure if there's much sort of history about one nostril devil, but
So, Becky,
Yeah.
Isn't there
Can you
something about
elucidate?
Saint Dunstan getting him by the nose with like a pair of tongs? I don't
There
know.
may be.
I don't know.
There may be.
My
That's
knowledge is limited at
unknown to science at present. But and this sense that the two nostrils indicate the ability to choose and the kind of discretion. And it's an interesting part of the face to choose for that metaphor. But I kind of appreciate it.
I'm gonna have to go and find out about devils and their nostrils now.
yeah, maybe a little extra bit of the poem. This is just a
Yeah,
little
this seems like the
quatrain.
right moment.
Yeah. The droplets of a word and the letters of a sea, the foliage of a bird and the feathers of a tree.
Aw.
Is contemplation just the means of acclimatizing yourself to death? Something I've been thinking about reading The Cloud. You know, like you pick the state that most resembles death, complete like unconsciousness, complete cloud-headed abstraction from your own personality, in
Hmm.
order to sort of acclimatize you to the abyss, so that when you arrive in the abyss, you're not like taken aback. The emptiness is kind of homely. You can look around and think, yes, I know this kind of thing.
Do you think it's just a version of like preparatory exposure therapy?
What's preparatory exposure therapy?
I don't know, like when you kind of get used to, if you have a
Oh, and
phobia
they
of
put a spider on your face.
exposing yourself to it. Is that what this is?
But
Yeah.
he sort of encounters this a little bit in when he's talking about removing oneself from elements of reality or kind of fleshy reality. And then he says, and there's a bit in my translation almost in brackets where it was like, and by the way, this would be very bad if you were to do this. And then went on about sort of self-harm and self-annihilation as being the complete removal of the self completely. But there is a line drawn, and this is maybe one of the most just objectively dogmatic moments of the whole text because he doesn't really justify it so much as saying that would be a great evil. And we know there's all of the Christian Catholic theology that justifies why self-harm, self-destruction are not permitted. But it's interesting in his frame because it's a kind of semi-annihilation he's talking about. Not maybe not permanent, but it is this sense of stripping stuff away. And you could imagine an extreme reading of it to be, well, why don't we strip ourselves away completely? One layer at a time until even and the body is almost posed as a villain or a thing to shed off. Why can't we get rid of it now? And it has always been a bit of a problem with this form of religious thought is how you can say not to do that. Like in one of John Donne's crazy paradox letters, he was talking about whether Christ is a suicide, whether we should count Christ as a suicide,
Mm.
and his notion, which isn't an exclusively Donnean notion, but is on the cross because Christ didn't last that long on the cross relative to your average crucifixion. He said, well, he simply chose to die at the time he died. He wasn't made to die. He didn't die from his wounds because he is, Christ is God or whatever. He decided, okay, now's the time for me to drop my head and die, and that's it. And he was having a lot of suicidal thoughts at the time of writing this, but he saw, oh, this is the kind of divine suicide. He has killed himself for everyone, but he has willed it to happen because without his will, it couldn't happen. But it's a curious sort of edge line you get to when you get to these more extreme contemplative practices as well. What is keeping us in the body? And it often, in my experience, seems to bend into a kind of a punishment or a means of suffering or a means of experiencing the world, but always something that you're kind of longing for the end of a little bit. And whether how much people really in their hearts want that, I'm not sure. But if there is a sense of, oh, we can be joined with the kind of Godhead, we can have this infinite bliss. Fair enough if you don't want to, walk around dreaded England of the 1300s with all the birds and trees and songs.
Yeah, I mean, for him, it's more just like I feel like the body's mostly just a distraction, isn't it? It's something that gets in the way in a like mildly irritating kind of way. It's not, he doesn't go all in on kind of the violence and the what they call the mortifications and the self-punishment and all that. He doesn't go for that. If anything, he counsels just sort of like a moderation with it. And it's just like, well, you've got this and you've got to put up with it for now. So like in one of the other texts that's attributed to him, it's called The Epistle of Discretion of Stirrings. It's great.
The
He talks about
pissel.
how epistle, yeah,
Oh,
like
okay.
letter.
I just
Like
heard pissel. So,
it is pissle. Pissle. Um, he kind of talks about how you can go too far with a lot of the body stuff, um, by, not sleeping enough or fasting too much or, wearing things that are uncomfortable or making yourself sit for too long. And he's like, he just kind of says, oh, don't, like it's not gonna help you to do any of that stuff. If your body's suffering, it's only going to feel the meditation's only going to be harder. So
mm.
he's quite moderate or humane, I'd even say, compared to a lot of authors in this period, in that he'll just be like, you know, you've got this body for now, and it can kind of be your sort of vehicle to practice this stuff. So give it what it needs so that it's not pushing back against you. Um,
It's all extremely practical, isn't it? It's
it
all
is
extremely
very
embodied,
practical.
the
Yeah,
entire work.
exactly. There's no kind of extremes of wear a hair shirt or whip yourself if you do this. He's just like, no, don't bother. It's not going to help your cause, which I honestly really enjoy about him.
Yeah, which is in some ways I find that's one of the reasons why I find the practical reception of the cloud more interesting than
Mm,
the literary reception of
yeah,
it. So I
yeah.
find the two Trappist Thomases of the 20th century, Merton and Keating, who had this very intimate relationship with the cloud and with the practices within it,
Mm.
and changed it, quite considerably. I mean, like Keating didn't like, for example, how the cloud author would would took a bit of a combative stance towards intrusive thoughts. He tells you to look over their shoulder, to be rude to them. If a thought comes and intrudes you while you're trying to meditate on God, while you're repeating your monosyllable, you look over its shoulder, you ignore it. Um,
But
I,
but you also,
mm,
sorry to jump in, but
God.
everyone always says this, and I'm always fighting this corner. He does say, press it down with a stirring of love. And I have this whole theory that it's
Mm,
actually like self-compassion and gentleness and pastoral care. And again, it's a really practical thing. It's a bit like
yeah.
from any sort of mindfulness manual or something you might read now, like, oh, you see these thoughts sort of floating past you, you just kind of look at them with love and then off they go. To me, it reads like that. Everyone else seems to
Mm,
disagree with me, but that tread it down with a stirring of love, I really think is important because he could just be like, bite it, smite it off and beat it down like he does with everything else. But
yeah.
it's your own
Yeah,
mind and your
and
own
the
thought.
Keating adjustment that he recommends is basically what you're suggesting. You just
I really,
you
yeah.
let it. You said I prefer to just let the thoughts arrive, know that they're there, and then watch them uh,
Yeah.
flow off the consciousness again, flow off the sort of rock face of consciousness and slide down it. Yeah. And you've been doing some sort of practical sort of things with the cloud at the moment. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the practical projects you've been doing with it?
So this has been really fun and like such an amazing contrast to just teaching it as a text. So I did it with my friend Aaron, whose kind of concept this was in the first place, of doing like a reading night with the text with sort of improvised music in the background. And the premise of this is that a bunch of people turn up some of whom have probably never even heard of this text. We had a real mixed audience, like some uni people, some people who'd just like seen an advert and rocked up, some people who I knew but from different contexts who'd never heard of this. Um, Everyone lay on the floor, which was really cozy and lovely. We were in a church, actually, the Round Church in Cambridge, which is old like Templar church,
It's a square-shaped church. I seem to
famously.
remember. Yeah.
um, and then we had like we had the texts on a little table. We had it in Middle English or Modern English, so people could choose what they wanted to do.
The right option and the wrong option.
Agree. And
Just
then
really judgmental.
I
All
know.
the all
I'm
the
so
all the modern English people, all the people sitting on the floor just look up and start hissing.
And the premise was you could come up and read a chapter, any chapter. We didn't do it chronologically because I think it is a text that invites kind of into and returning to. You don't have to read the whole thing every time. And we just like marked a page or marked the chapter with a post-it note when it had been done. And we did this for 4 or 5 hours. And then Aaron kind of created this amazing sort of improvised soundscape from sounds in the room,
Hmm.
also sounds that they already
Sort
had.
of
And we ended
stretched
up
out or
creating
echoed, or did he like
all
sample them and
sorts of
then just
things.
make, yeah.
We had a bit where people's recorded voices were sampled and then turned into a kind of choral piece that then like built up over the course of the evening, and that was and then it would echo words that they'd already said, which was interesting with the monosyllables because there were just
Hmm.
loads of random words and sounds coming out. um and that was really amazing, and a lot of people actually found it to be a kind of contemplative event for them. That was what their experience was. A lot of people, they lay down and went into this sort of deep meditative state. A lot of people found the actual reading of it to be kind of trance-like in its own way. And it was really cool to see people who'd never heard of this, knew nothing about Middle English mysticism or the Middle Ages at all, get like so into this. Some people were singing the passages they were doing. One woman said she'd like felt the text in her bones afterwards. And I was just like, wow, this is a completely different way of engaging with this. And I think you hear it completely differently in that context as well. And that was the moment where I really realized how like bodily the language is, like hearing people sort of struggle to get it out or like sort of labor over certain words and linger on certain words. Yeah, it was really, really fun. And it changed how I engage with it a lot. It was super relaxing. That was the thing that everyone sort of reported. They were like, oh, I could have stayed there and slept all night. Don't really know what the cloud author would make of that as the sort of primary outcome, but yeah, people just came and like rested for a few hours, and some people did sleep. They fell asleep and they snored, and that was fine. Um, it was really cool, and I hope we can do it again.
Why isn't an English degree just like that? What I don't understand why you don't why the scholastic method, which everyone knows, every academic knows, is in danger of killing the essence of the text. Loads of the text you study in English, like are telling you not to dissect them. Like
Exactly.
Wordsworth, I think we murder to dissect. Why? Yeah, it just strikes me as, especially in a university town at Cambridge, why you can't have much, much more lived engagement with literature. It's so strange.
I
Uh,
completely agree. I completely agree. And it was funny, I had quite a lot of not pushback, but skepticism from people like within the department and stuff when I was running it. one person was calling it, "Oh, you're doing that singing cloud thing." I'm like, no, I'm just reading the text how it was meant to be read. Like, it's not that deep. Um, but I completely agree. Like, you actually can enjoy the thing for what it is
Yeah.
and taking it to pieces that way.
And I suppose it doesn't work with most texts. Novels are solitary. Middlemarch, you're there for what, 18 hours. Uh, but uh, yeah, and that limits the canon a little bit. The But you've still got all lyric poetry,
Yeah,
for example.
yeah.
You've got loads of stuff that could be more out loud. The counterexample is Shakespeare, where lots of people also experience it in the theatrical setting with
Mm.
actors as something kind of alive and happening around them. But in yeah, I think like English departments really should think about more ways of doing these sorts of things. It just seems such an obvious thing to do. And you're English, you've studied English. You should be up for this kind of thing. You're artsy folk. You
Exactly.
don't like the chemists. God forbid. All the chemists just doing these. I don't know, like a similar, like the Cloud of Unknowing event leaves the round church, and the chemists walk in and reading the periodic table, reading various carbon,
Weeping as they
weeping at
do.
carbon. What?
Oh,
I completely agree. I think there is like a slight and very gradual sort of resurgence of this. What I'm thinking about is a group of medievalists who are somewhere in the US, I can't actually remember where, and they're doing like a staging of the medieval mystery plays, like the cycle plays. And they're trying to do it as close to the sort of performance contexts that people would have encountered it in as possible. So just like on a random little wagon while people are going about the rest of their day, they actively encourage sort of heckling, participation, like complete informality and disregard of everything you think a performance should be. Random people getting involved, speaking back to what's going on stage, like very shoddy handmade costumes, that sort of thing. And I think that's really important. And I don't know why it's taken us this long to think about these things. Because you have a completely different experience of those plays. I don't know if you've read any of them, but they're really funny, irreverent,
Hmm.
ridiculous. And I think a lot of that's lost if you're just reading it on the page. But as
Just
soon as it's performed, it's
yeah.
amazing. And you can see where Monty Python got everything from if you read a few of those. Like, it's just fantastic. And again, you look at them now and you think, was that not so extraordinarily blasphemous to come out with all this stuff? But no, it was fine. And I just
Mhm.
think you need to animate these things to get the most out of them.
Yeah. I suppose another counterexample is kind of people within churches. You go into, the engagement that, especially people with a very high view of scriptural authority, you sort of
Mm,
very Protestant, evangelical, conservative evangelical types, the way they, the way they engage with the Bible, especially like poetic books of the Bible, where it becomes, it's more of an aesthetic object, is genuinely a lot of the time much more interesting than an
mm,
academic engagement with it.
yeah,
Because it's a lived thing, if you're like you're reading Ecclesiastes in the context of a like faith tradition and some sort of lived believed practice, it really yeah, it comes to life, and you end up having much more interesting discussions with people who have that kind of relationship to
yeah,
Ecclesiastes. You
yeah.
know, yeah. So yeah. That's one of the main appeals of um like of the sort of non-dom evangelical Christianity to me is like it's like a really weird niche intense book club.
and there's one book.
Yeah, yeah. But like loads of it's just like really ancient, like really weird name. Like this is like, what are we making of this? Especially if it's one of the ones who are just like really going through it verse by verse. And you
Yeah.
get to like a bit where like, Onan has refused to sleep with his father's wife and spilled his seed on the floor instead. Like, and we're in a group of people and they're all like really hyper intense, focused on this story in a way that I just find like just extremely invigorating and strange and surreal. Yeah.
And I like the predetermined conclusion that it's all great. It's all the best book.
Yeah, yeah.
And if there's a sentence you didn't, I didn't get it. I got to look into this. The spilled the seed stuff. Didn't love it when I heard it, but I know it's
I know
genius.
it's the best book possible, and that I'm being communicated to through it by like by the source of all being. I love that relationship to it, to a book that's so clearly just full of like really weird arbitrary stuff. Like that number of, and this guy brought 7 camels and 3 goats, and just very specific numbers of things being brought. The name of every single man who built a wall. I just love, yeah. They also
Well,
offer you a lot of free food.
ah, I see. Oh man.
Yeah,
But you've tried out the cloud in a setting not dissimilar from that, haven't you?
yeah. So it's l'Abbé de Hautecombe, the Hautecombe. I don't know how the English. I don't know if you're an English person and you're trying to pronounce something in French. Do you just say it super English? Going to the
I think
There's
so.
cave.
no
Yeah.
good way to
I
do it, is there?
Agincourt is how it's
Agincourt,
said.
yeah, Combray. Anyways, the abbey, which was, I think it was, who were the Bernard of Clairvaux guys? What are they called? The
Sessions.
Cistercians. So it was a Cistercian abbey, um, that was in on the edge of the deepest lake in Europe, Lac de Bourget, um, which and it was on the other side of the lake initially, but Bernard of Clairvaux visited them on the other side of the lake, had a dream that they should change the side of the lake, and immediately kind of build another abbey on the other side of the lake, which is the main abbey, and that's where it is today, based on Bernard of Clairvaux's dream. He's like
Are
that
you
little
sure? Are you
that
sure, Bernard?
outcrop. Yeah.
Are you
No, that
certain that?
that promontory, that's the one. And
All right, Bernard.
and it sort of changed hands a bunch of times and ended up with these kind of charismatic, friendly Jesuit folks, called Chemin Neuf, who are like they're kind of a bit of a neo-monastic thing, and it's originally in France, but they're all over the world. Their costume is beige. They all wear beige, which I find kind of funny. Like, especially if you see them en masse, because sometimes like loads of them came to the monastery at the same time. You just got like you never see like 250 people all in beige. What a, and it's not like a unified uniform. It's just
Oh,
anything beige you happen to have.
what?
It's all very practical. It's all very practical. Like even the name, like Chemin Neuf, is just the name of the street that it was initially set up on in Lyon. Anyway, they inherited this thing and set it up as like a discipleship kind of find your calling thing for young people. And I was there just as a volunteer. I was just like gardening and picking weeds, loads of weeding. I like weeded that thing like crazy. Yeah. I listened to all of Dvorak's symphonies like worth like all 9 of them. I think like 4 times just weeding, which is, quite intense. But while there, I read The Cloud of Unknowing for the first time. They had a very limited number of English books in there. For some reason, they had like all of D.H. Lawrence. And I thought, I'm not in, I'm not really in the mood for that right now.
Temptation.
I don't feel like the right thing for this. And Cloud of Unknowing, and just read that and was immediately, well, if I don't try this now, then when? Because just part of the daily routine there was there's always a mass at 12, and there's always like a Vespers thing at 5. You're in churches a lot of the day, and I liked going along with the stuff. Yeah, eventually I started cutting out the mass because there's only so many masses. I really don't. I really think the Catholic Church should have other things they do, like the equivalent to the mass. Just like I'm all in favor of like the remembrance of the Last Supper, like once a week. But like if you're in the monastic thing, it would be great if you had like other stories in there as well. Like if there was a fishing bit, like you go and there's like a fishing net and everyone has to like go under the net. You get in a queue at the front and the guy puts a net on you and takes it off. Just anything else. I'm just this free associating ideas here, like. But like when Vatican III comes around, feel free to consult this part of the video.
We'll put a
Um,
link.
but anyway, yeah, I just find myself a lot of the time in these, you know, holy zones and thought, okay, let's just try this. And especially because it was a view of meditation that I liked the positive twist it had, that when you give yourself entirely over to the void, to the abyss, to the Zen state of unbeing, you've paradoxed your way into unbeing, that then you're picked up from there. That was extremely appealing. It
Mm.
wasn't that you're going into the abyss and seeing creation in the context of the abyss, and therefore it's not that kind of brain rewiring process that lots of other meditative traditions seem to have built into them. It's a different kind where you bang on the dark and you're lifted out of the dark eventually, you know. And I wasn't lifted out of the dark, but I was extremely helpful for sort of ideas. Like whenever I've practiced it, and it's I don't last more than 10 minutes. I think PlayStation 2 completely fried my attention span for life. There's no escape. There's only 10 minutes of attention. It's maximal. But like after 10 minutes, I would actually, an idea would be banging on the front of my head by that
Mm.
stage. It was impossible not to go and write something down afterwards every time I tried it, which would often be like just like little quatrains of poetry or something, but often was like really complicated continuous melodies or chord progressions or things in music, which were just which were really strange because of their complexity. I don't have a particularly sophisticated inner musical vocabulary. Like I can't think in I can only modulate so far away from like the tonic in my head music space. But I was just these things would just happen automatically whenever I tried this stuff out. Um, it wasn't a particularly um, religious experience, despite it happening in a monastery and me, doing a very religious looking practice. It all felt much more worldly, embodied in the world. I didn't. I think the chance of me being lifted out of the world was very slim, uh, and sure enough, was not. I remain here. I remain unascended. Um, but yeah, that was my experience with it, and I've not really engaged too much with it since. I prefer like specifically within Christian contemplative practice. I prefer it when there's a few more words. Like I like the rosary because it's like got again video game style checkpoints, reloading points. You only got to do 10 in a row of Hail Marys, and then you got like a reload, and you can phew, you can go do something else, kick a ball around, ah, a fly. Yeah. Should I read more of the last bit of the poem?
Yeah.
Yeah. There is less purpose in it, and I'm talking more or less about everything now, than in the sound it makes as its sacred fires digest themselves. There is more meaning in the word universe than in the universe. If you peel away God's skin, you will find it all still there, cleaving to his flesh, but enfolding you also. For the God you hoped to unspool swallowed you in his reef of knots and left you banging on the dark like an apple tree dropping apples.
Amazing.
I imagined being under the earth and hearing apples dropping, like if you're buried under an apple tree and you just hear the buzz, buzz. I imagine from God's point of view, that's kind of what being prayed at in a cloud
What it
way
feels
is
like.
like. Apples being thrown at at the mud.
It's kind of annoying after a while, don't you think?
These
Yeah.
guys with their
Yeah.
praying all the time
I've seen
gets a
Bruce
sort of
Almighty.
broomstick.
I I
That's when
like
you get the beam of light out when he sort of prods back.
look at this
Get off
beam of
my
light on
yard.
your
I was
screen
just
now, Becky.
thinking, like, a
You've
beat.
done it.
I've made
You've
it.
done it.
I've
The
completed the
cloud
cloud
is
of unknowing.
broken.
I'll be off out the window in a minute.
Yeah. Would be a
You may
great
never see me
ending.
again.
Begins to ascend. But it reminds me of a thing. Walter Hilton has a very similar, which is, I guess, why they try to take cloud and put it in his box. But this notion of you are in the light and day of sensory universe and you love it. But the only way to get into the light and day of the spiritual universe is to first go through the night, through the darkness. One of his great descriptions is when it's first dark, you can't see anything. It's just pitch black and you're stumbling around, but then your eyes start to get used to this new darkness and you can start to kind of figure out where you're at, who you are, what's going on, and then eventually the sun will rise again, and it's a different sun, and you're in the spiritual light. But then Jack's experience is kind of like you go into the dark, kind of get used to it, and then the sun rises, but it's the same sun as before. You're back in the sensory world, but you brought something back in a way, and that
Mm,
you can go and start, having your pugilist fight with the cloud of unknowing if you want. You won't get through, but on the way back to sensory reality, you might bring something interesting or beautiful, or indeed you might be impelled to write the cloud of unknowing. So if we were to take the severe attitude that we're not getting through, it doesn't make it worthless. It
mm,
doesn't mean there's no point going into the dark because yeah, you come back and something follows you or you
mm.
bring something with you.
Yeah, and I think it's never meant to be a process with an end either. Like this is a thing that you're going to do for your whole life and you're going to keep returning and keep trying again. And sometimes it's going to be really frustrating and God isn't going to show up and you just have to be okay with that. And you might only be able to access this state for a few minutes and then you've got to go back and do the rest of your day. I think he's really realistic and again practical about that. And that it's kind of trial and error. It's not going to be the same every time. And that's fine. And he really means it with the sort of twice and thrice and keep coming back and reading it all through. And you'll find different things in it each time that you come back to it. Because there isn't really a sort of end to this. It's just like you insert yourself into a loop or into a spiral and just accept that that's what your life is going to be now. And that if you get these sort of glimmers of like union or encounter or illuminatory moments, that's what it is,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day
Yeah.
you're still a human and you've got to come back and do your stuff.
And
And
3 seconds in the presence of God is worth a lifetime.
Exactly, apparently it
yeah,
is.
and he builds that in pretty early on with the his sort of divisibility of time, little
Yeah.
digression, and saying there are these tiny units which cannot become smaller than anything else. To basically say microsecond, whatever it is, but that only a few of those actually breaking through the cloud. That's wonderful because the student is immediately concerned. Well, I can't in all of these units of time. Most of them, barely paying attention. But Mr. Cloud sort of creates, well, almost the entire rest of the book is a response to that one bit of quoted student
Mm.
questioning. But the notion is, you just need a few of those. Don't worry if most of them are just kind of lost stumbling in the dark, or sort of drinking some ale. You just need a few of those tiny slithers of reality, just like flashes, to be this true sight. And
Mm.
you've done more than enough. Which again is sort of a comforting hand, because a lot of these mystic handbooks can be fairly daunting
Yeah.
and difficult, and so that you will go through the suffering and the pain, and you won't come out the other side, and you can fail and you can fall to the dark powers.
Mm.
And I got a little bit of this in Walter Hilton, not that he made it hard, but that he did caution those with visionary experiences. You could go down the wrong angle.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, our friend the Cloud he gives you quite a good deal, saying you only need to get a tiny fragment of time. And if you do, you'll want to keep doing it because of the joy of it, right? It's not, while there is the pain and the annoyance and the suffering and the forgetting, there is this sense that if you actually manage to do it, you'll want to do it again. It
Mm.
won't be like, oh, we got to do the contemplation thing again. Okay, sin, 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 sin. It's more that you're sort of like, oh, I can't wait to get back. Then
Exactly.
start saying sin multiple times.
Uh, there's the bit in where Ivan Karamazov, one of his poems in the Dostoevsky novel, is as a man walking for quadrillion years on a like a uncomfortable sort of stone path,
Mm.
and at the end of the quadrillion year hike, he gets like a few seconds in the presence of God, and it's immediately worth the quadrillion years, and would do the whole thing again.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, but imagine if it wasn't. That would be an interesting moment. You break through, and it's all
It's
right.
pretty
It's like, oh,
good.
this
It's
is
like
this is
it's
yeah,
better
this
than
is
the
oh,
walk,
yeah,
but
and you've got early gates and the angels. I mean, yeah, this he's done a good job, but it's like the Paris syndrome. It's like, yeah, it's good. No, I like it, but quadrillion years, that's a long time. But I do, I
I'm
like
not.
it.
Yeah,
I
no, I'm
like
not
it.
like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you've done a good job. It's I don't know what I thought. I don't know. I didn't really have anything in mind, I guess. I just it's good. It's good.
I've done two more cloud compositions apart from the other one you heard, Becky, where I wonder if we could simultaneously listen to one of them.
Yes, please.
So I've got the one of them's about 3 minutes, one of them's about 5 minutes. How are we feeling? Five?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right, I'll zip this over. I'll send a link. So just to fill in the folks at home, I thought it would be nice to replicate the experience of 12 different people in a room, all doing their own monosyllable, and the sort of jibber jabber of prayer that you hear in the room, and whether that sort of discordant field of all these different prayers could be seen as one thing, protracted as a single thing. So I thought, why not those 12 keys of the keyboard? I and assign each sort of key to an instrument. So I've got like, here's a virtual violin, and that's just going to be A flat. And it can be all the A flats. It can be the high A flats and the low A flats, but it's just going to be stuck there in A flat. And then another instrument will just be piano, and it will be in C. And I've just gradually been building this up with improvised tracks. I've not been like composing it very carefully. It's just been very in the moment. Okay, I'm doing the C one now, and you got to just hit C notes very meditatively. C5 now, another C5, and build up the whole thing slowly like that. And The first few, I was just sort of letting it happen a bit more automatically. I was just seeing what kind of soundscapes would uh, come around, what kind of musical language would happen when you um, do that sort of thing. Just you automatically get weird harmonies if the 12 notes are just flowing over each other in all sorts of ways, and you're not trying to control it harmonically in any way. But then I, like, gradually, the more I've been doing it, I've been uh, composing a bit more conscientiously. I've been like lengthening notes, shortening notes, and one thing that I was initially trying to avoid was too much mud. So like putting like lots of, especially in like the lower register, lots of notes that are in a clump, like an E, an F sharp, and a G, like four semitones next to each other. I was trying to avoid that kind of thing. And in this one, I was just sort of giving way to that entirely. I was just like, let the mud happen. In fact, where possible, maximize mud. And I'll just post it into the chat now. It's the link to the Google Drive. The result is kind of spooky and unpleasant. It would be nice if there was a way of doing this where it was actually quite a beautiful sound that came from it. But I've not yet found a way of all 12 notes playing at the same time and that being beautiful. There's a bit in John Coltrane's Love Supreme where he plays the do 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 Love Supreme riff on all 12 notes of the chromatic scale, which gives this kind of, permeation of love through the universe, um, kind of quality to it. But yeah, should we? Have you got it as well, Milo? The link?
I've got it.
Yeah. Should we press play on like 3, 2, 1, play?
Don't think mine's doing anything.
You hear it?
Whoa.
You got to go to work, Milo, right? Country
I
can't
gotta
run
go to work.
itself.
It can't. It's true.
Oh.
Farewell to
Yeah,
all good folk.
yeah,
I journey into my cloud of forgetting.
yeah. And I guess bye-bye to the folks at home. I'll stop the recording there.
See you guys.
Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.